before it was marble, before it was empire, before the word Rome echoed through colosseums and cathedrals, there was only silence and land, a stretch of hills in central Italy, brushed by the warm breath of the Mediterranean, cut through by a slow-moving river, the Tiber, muddy and ancient, whispering to the reeds. There, life flickered in the soil. Long before the legions marched, before emperors ruled from palaces of gold, there stood shepherds with rough hands, their flocks grazing on the Palatine Hill, where wolves still howled in the dark. And in this wilderness a myth was born, not gently but in blood. Twin brothers Romulus and Remus, abandoned to die by royal jealousy, set adrift in a basket like forgotten cargo. But the gods, it seemed, were watching. A she-wolf found them, her body warm, her instincts wild. She nursed them like her own, her milk giving strength to boys who would shape a world. Raised by shepherds, hardened by the hills, they grew into fierce young men, dreamers with swords. But dreams divide, and fate, like empire, comes at a cost. Romulus struck down his brother, a fratricide that would echo through Roman politics for centuries. Over his brother's grave, he drew a trench, and into that trench he poured the first stones, the first rituals, the first law. This was the founding of Rome. April 21st, 753 BCE. So the legend claims. A city built on the bones of ambition, on myth, on blood, and destiny. But history too was stirring. By the 8th century BCE, Rome was no longer just a tale whispered to children. It was a Latinate village, modest in size, but strategically placed. On trade routes between Etruscan and Greek colonies, it absorbed languages, ideas, and gods, like a sponge. By the 6th century BCE, kings ruled the land. Some were Etruscan in origin, wearing purple robes, carving stone temples, introducing the curved arch and urban planning. Rome began to rise, not in glory, but in complexity. It was still made of timber and clay, but its heartbeat had changed. It was no longer just surviving. It was watching, learning, preparing. Then came a shift. Tired of monarchs, their power unchecked, their greed too visible, the people revolted. In 509 BCE, the last king, Tarquinius Superbus, was driven into exile, and with him, the age of kings was over. From his ashes rose a daring experiment, the Roman Republic. No crown, no throne, only magistrates elected by citizens, laws debated in the forum, power divided, at least in theory. The Senate held sway, the patricians, old noble families, clutched their privileges. The plebeians, the working class, clamored for food, land, and respect. It was a republic forged in tension, kept alive by compromise, and driven by an insatiable hunger for expansion. Rome was no longer just a village. It had become an idea, sharpened by iron, shaped by ambition. So close your eyes. Picture that moment, a smoky morning on the Palatine Hill, the sky painted in soft pastels, the Tiber flowing like a silver ribbon through the valley. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd calls out. A senator begins to speak, and the earth itself seems to listen. Rome has been born. It is fragile, but it is burning with something eternal, and it is only the beginning. Rome did not become an empire overnight. It did not conquer with muscle alone, but with stubbornness, with patience, and with a roadmap. From the moment the kings were gone, the young Roman Republic began to move outward, not in great leaps, but like a tide that never recedes. First came the neighboring Latin towns, Alba Longa, Tibur, Veii. Some were taken by force, others were bound by treaties, carefully worded and never quite equal. Rome's military was not yet mighty, but its method was relentless. The maniple system, flexible units of infantry, made Roman legions more adaptable than the rigid phalanxes of Greece. They moved like flowing iron, and they learned from every defeat, and there were many. Rome did not rise without scars. It was burned, invaded, betrayed. In 390 BCE, the Gauls came from the north, stormed the city, and left it in ashes. The Romans rebuilt, taller, stronger, angrier. Woe to the vanquished, they said, and they never forgot. In time, the Republic would stretch across the Italian peninsula, but it did not merely conquer. It absorbed. Rather than crush their enemies entirely, Rome often offered them a gift, partial citizenship, a place on the ladder, not at the top, but with a hand on the rung. This was genius. Enemies became allies. Local soldiers became Roman troops. Latin became the shared tongue. And when those allies fought beside Rome, they didn't just win land, they won identity. To be Roman was no longer about birth. It was about allegiance, about belonging to something bigger than a tribe. Infrastructure followed the soldiers. Roads, long, straight, and paved in stone, stitched the peninsula together. The most famous of all, the Via Appia, connected Rome to the southern ports by 312 BCE. It was called the Regina Viarum, the Queen of Roads, and on it marched history itself. Milestones measured distance, aqueducts carried water, bridges crossed rivers once impassable. The land itself bent to Roman will. Yet Rome's greatest challenges lay beyond Italy. Across the blue shimmer of the Mediterranean lay Carthage, a wealthy, ancient city in North Africa, ruled by merchants and seafarers. Two powers, one sea. It could not last. And so began the Punic Wars, a trilogy of blood, brilliance, and brutality that would shape the Republic forever. But that is for the next chapter. For now, picture the Republic, not yet an empire, but pulsing with purpose. A city of stern-faced senators, dust-covered generals, and citizens who believed they were building something eternal. The sun is setting over the Forum. Bronze shields catch the last of the light, and somewhere a legionnaire sharpens his blade. Rome is ready to meet the world. The Mediterranean Sea. Rome called it Mare Nostrum, our sea. But before they could claim it, they had to fight for every wave, every port, every island that floated like pearls on blue silk. And across that sea stood a rival just as proud, just as cunning, and far older. Carthage, a jewel of the Phoenician world, wealthy, urban, naval, a city of merchants and admirals, its harbors busy with sails and silver, its walls thick with confidence. Rome was strong on land. Carthage ruled the water. Two powers, one sea. A clash was inevitable. The First Punic War began in 264 BCE. sparked by a conflict over a Sicilian city no one remembers now. But Rome, never content to fight small, built an entire navy from scratch. They studied captured Carthaginian ships, copied their design, then added a new invention, the corvus, a boarding bridge. If Rome couldn't outsail Carthage, they would turn sea battles into land battles, and it worked. The war dragged for 23 years, until Carthage, exhausted and bankrupt, surrendered. Sicily became Rome's first province, but peace would not last. Because in Carthage, a boy had grown into a man. His name was Hannibal. In 218 BCE, the Second Punic War began, and Hannibal didn't sail to Rome. He marched from Spain, across the Pyrenees, through the frozen peaks of the Alps, with an army of mercenaries and war elephants that had never seen snow. It was madness. It was brilliance. It was war. Rome had never known fear like this. At Cannae, Hannibal delivered the worst defeat in Roman history. Over 50,000 Roman soldiers fell in a single day. The Republic trembled, but it did not fall. Rome fought back the only way it knew how, slowly, persistently, like a grinding wheel. General Scipio Africanus took the war to Carthage itself. At Zama in 202 BCE, he defeated Hannibal on his own soil. The war ended. Carthage survived, but barely. Rome claimed Spain. Gold flowed into the Republic. The legions came home hardened. More than soldiers, they were now instruments of empire. But Rome had a long memory. A generation later, a Roman senator named Cato the Elder ended every speech with, "Carthago delenda est." Carthage must be destroyed. And in 149 BCE, the Third Punic War began. This was no campaign. It was a death sentence. For 3 years, the Romans besieged the city, and in 146 BCE, they stormed it. Street by street, fire, slaughter, dust. Carthage burned. Its survivors sold into slavery, its ruins cursed. Legend says the Romans sowed salt into the soil, so nothing would ever grow there again. With Carthage gone, Rome was no longer just a republic. It was a superpower. It held Greece, Spain, North Africa. Its navy ruled the sea. Its roads connected thousands of miles of territory. But power has a cost. Within Rome, something had shifted. The Senate grew arrogant. The rich grew richer. And the legions, they no longer fought just for Rome, but for the generals who paid them. Storm clouds gathered over the Republic. But for now, Rome stood tall, with her enemies crushed, and her pride rising like marble from ashes. Close your eyes and hear the distant clang of swords, the cries of merchants in the forum, and the heavy silence where Carthage once stood. Rome had won, but something inside her was starting to fracture. Victory had made Rome rich, but wealth, like wine, can sour if taken too fast. After the Punic Wars, spoils poured into the city: gold, slaves, land, and luxury. Temples glittered, feasts grew lavish, and senators wrapped themselves in purple and pride. But underneath the marble, the Republic was beginning to rot. The Senate, once a body of wise old men, became a club for the aristocracy. The patricians grew wealthier than kings. The plebeians, the backbone of the legions, came home from war to find their farms seized, their debts unpaid, their voices ignored. And yet, Rome kept expanding. In Greece, they looted the legacy of philosophers and sculptors. In Asia Minor, they plundered cities as old as time. The Republic's borders stretched like skin over a swelling empire. But the system within could not stretch with it. Rome had been built for a city, not a world. Into this tension stepped a new kind of hero, not a lawgiver, not a philosopher, but a general. Men like Marius, a self-made soldier who reformed the army. He opened the ranks to the poor, to landless men who had nothing except the promise of pay, plunder, and purpose. They didn't fight for the Republic. They fought for him. This was something new and dangerous. Soon came Sulla, a patrician with ice in his veins. He marched on Rome itself twice. Legions, once protectors of law, became tools of ambition. The Senate lost its grip. Power shifted to the battlefield. Rome was devouring itself, not from weakness, but from too much strength in too few hands. Slavery increased. By some estimates, 1 in every 3 people in Italy was now a slave. Many were educated Greeks, teachers, scribes, philosophers. Others were chained to fields, to mines, to lives of silence. And not all were willing to stay that way. In 73 BCE, a man named Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator, led a revolt. Not with politics, but with fury. For 2 years, he and his followers defeated legion after legion, marching from city to city like a shadow. Eventually, he was stopped, crushed, and his men, 6,000 of them, were crucified along the Appian Way. Their bodies, nailed to crosses, stretched for over 100 miles. A message carved in flesh: rebellion will be punished, always. But the real war was still within. Rome had no king, but it had kings in all but name, men with armies, riches, and loyalty bought in blood. One of them was rising fast, charming, brilliant, dangerous. His name was Julius Caesar. But that is for the next act. For now let your mind rest in the flickering twilight of a republic losing its shape, in the clamor of ambition, the hush of conspiracy, and the soft sound of boots marching ever closer to the heart of power. His name still echoes like a drumbeat: Caesar. Not just a man, but a title that would crown emperors for centuries. Tsar, Kaiser, all born from him. But long before the name became legend, Gaius Julius Caesar was a boy from a noble but fading family, patrician in blood, but not in fortune, sharp-eyed, hungry, and dangerous in a way that Rome had not yet learned to fear. He understood something no one else quite did, that in a republic bloated with wealth and corruption, charm was as lethal as a sword. He climbed through politics like a dancer on a tightrope. He flattered the Senate. He courted the people. He threw games, festivals, banquets, all on borrowed money, but his debts bought him loyalty. And soon he had something better than gold, the love of the mob. And then, in 60 BCE, he made a move that would change history. He formed a secret alliance, the first triumvirate, with 2 powerful rivals, Pompey, Rome's greatest general, and Crassus, its richest man. Together they ruled behind the curtain. Caesar was given command in Gaul, Modern-day France, a distant province, wild and unstable. And there, he became more than a politician. He became a conqueror. For nearly a decade, Caesar waged war in Gaul. He defeated tribe after tribe, crossed rivers in the dead of winter, and even invaded Britain, where no Roman had dared set foot. His legions worshipped him, his enemies feared him, and every victory fed the machine of his ambition. He wrote home, dispatches to the Senate, crafted with care and drama. They read like epics, like theater. The people of Rome devoured them. Caesar wasn't just winning wars. He was shaping his legend in real time. But back in Rome, the balance was shifting. Crassus died in battle. Pompey, once an ally, now turned rival. And the Senate, alarmed by Caesar's power, ordered him to return home without his army. Caesar faced a choice: obey and fade into safety, or defy and gamble everything. He chose defiance. In 49 BCE, he crossed the Rubicon River, a small stream that marked the boundary of Italy. It was illegal. It was rebellion. And with it, he uttered words that chilled the Republic. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. Civil war erupted. Caesar marched on Rome. Pompey fled. One by one, his enemies fell. Egypt, Greece, North Africa, he pursued them across continents, and at every turn, he won. By 45 BCE, Caesar was dictator for life. He passed laws, reformed calendars, pardoned enemies. He wore the laurel wreath like a crown. He rebuilt the Senate and filled it with loyalists. He offered bread to the poor and glory to the rich. And Rome, exhausted by chaos, welcomed him with cheers. But power invites envy, and men raised in the shadow of the Republic could not bear the rise of a king, even one without the title. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, Caesar entered the Senate. He never left alive Brutus, his friend, Cassius, his colleague, and over 20 senators rose with blades in their hands. They stabbed him 23 times. No guards, no mercy, no escape. As his blood soaked the floor, legend says he looked to Brutus and whispered, "Et tu, Brute?" Even you. The Republic thought it had saved itself, but all it had done was light the match for the fire to come. Let your breath slow now. Picture the marble pillars of the Senate, cracked by silence, the streets of Rome hushed, the Forum echoing with footsteps and fate. Julius Caesar was dead, but his shadow, it would only grow. The knife that killed Caesar did not save the Republic. It shattered it. The senators who plunged their blades believed they were preserving liberty. Instead, they lit a fire that would consume the world they knew. Rome awoke the next morning not to peace, but to panic. The streets buzzed with fear. Some cheered, more wept, and Caesar's body, wrapped in blood and cloth, lay in the Forum as a silent warning. Power does not go quietly. In the days that followed, Rome became a chessboard of ambition. Enter Mark Antony, Caesar's friend, his general, his echo. Bold, charismatic, and born for command, Antony seized the moment. He gave Caesar a funeral like no other, and in doing so, gave the people something to burn for. As Caesar's will was read aloud, the crowd learned he had left them money, public gardens, and love. They wept, they howled, and then they rioted. The conspirators fled Rome. The republic they had hoped to revive was already gasping its last breath. But Antony was not alone. Another figure stepped from the shadows, young, quiet, watchful. His name was Octavian, barely 19, Caesar's adopted son and heir. No one took him seriously. Not yet. But Octavian was not like the others. He moved carefully, patiently, and with the cold brilliance of someone who didn't crave war, but would use it, if needed. He aligned with Antony, and together with Lepidus, they formed the Second Triumvirate, a legal dictatorship of 3 men, given the task of restoring order. Their first act, a prescription list, a catalogue of enemies marked for death. Senators, rivals, even family members. Their names were read aloud, their property seized, their heads displayed in the forum. Even Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, met his end here, his tongue cut out, as if words had finally failed. But no alliance in Rome lasted long. Antony drifted east and into the arms of Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, mother of Caesar's only son. To many in Rome this was treason draped in silk. Antony now spoke Greek, wore foreign robes, and promised Cleopatra's children power over Roman lands. Octavian used this to his advantage. He painted Antony as a traitor, seduced by the East, corrupted by desire. And in 31 BCE, the 2 men met in battle at Actium, a naval clash on the Ionian Sea. Octavian won. Antony and Cleopatra fled, then took their own lives in Alexandria, their story ending not in glory, but in myth. Octavian returned to Rome alone, but he did not declare himself king. He was too careful for that. Instead, in 27 BCE, he took the title Augustus, the revered one. He spoke of restoring the republic, but he kept absolute power. He controlled the army, the treasury, the laws. The republic was dead, and no one dared say it aloud. Let your breath slow. Feel the weight of centuries shift, the noise of the Senate fade, the roar of the crowd still. A new age has begun, the age of emperors, of temples carved in gold, of Rome, not as a city, but as the center of the world. And it all began with a boy no one believed in. It was not born in peace, but now, for the first time in living memory, Rome exhaled. After centuries of bloodshed, after kings and consuls, assassins and civil wars, Augustus brought silence. Not the silence of fear, but the soft, measured quiet of order. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, wasn't just a slogan. It was an era, 200 years, a stretch of time so calm, so stable, that generations were born, grew old, and died without ever hearing the clash of Roman swords within the heart of the empire. Augustus ruled with the mind of a statesman and the patience of a gardener. He reformed the army. Soldiers now served for 20 years, then received land or pensions. They became loyal not to generals, but to Rome itself. He rebuilt temples, restored morality laws, even took the title Pontifex Maximus, high priest of the Roman religion. He famously said, "I found Rome a city of brick. I leave it a city of marble." And he meant it. The city gleamed. Statues lined the avenues. Obelisks from Egypt stood beside Roman columns. The Arapacis, the altar of peace, glowed with carved vines and the promise of prosperity. Across the empire, roads linked far corners like veins. From Hadrian's wall in Britannia to the shining stones of Palmyra in Syria, Rome was one beating heart. Merchants sailed from Alexandria to Gaul. Letters traveled from Athens to Hispania. And a Roman citizen could walk for months and always hear the same tongue, see the same laws, feel the same protection. This wasn't just an empire, it was an identity. Even those who had once fought Rome now served in its army, worshipped its gods, sent their children to Roman schools. In cities across the provinces, amphitheaters echoed with cheers, aqueducts carried fresh water, and forums rang with debates in Latin and Greek. The emperors who followed Augustus were not all wise. Some were mad, some cruel. Some, like Caligula and Nero, left behind trails of fire and fear. But the machine held. Because Augustus had done more than take power. He had built a system, one that endured. And so Rome reached its height, not in conquest, but in calm, not in blood, but in bread. The people were fed, entertained, protected, and the world for a while belonged to Rome. So let your mind drift now through the cool stone baths of Carthage, through the libraries of Ephesus, through the bustling markets of Pompeii before the ash fell. Listen to the soft rustle of togas, the hum of chariots over cobblestones, the prayers whispered in candle-lit temples. This is Rome at peace, not a myth, not a war, but a world. While Rome ruled the world with roads and armies, a quieter revolution was taking shape in the distant provinces, not in marble palaces, not in the halls of the Senate, but in the hills of Judea under Roman occupation, in a corner of the empire few in Rome ever thought about. It began, not with a crown, but with a carpenter. Jesus of Nazareth, a man born under the reign of Augustus, taught of love, of peace, of a kingdom not of this earth. He spoke not to emperors, but to fishermen, widows, and the poor. He healed, he walked, he wept, and his message, radical in its simplicity, spread like fire in dry grass. To Rome, he was just another local troublemaker. To his followers, he was the Messiah. By the time of Tiberius, the second emperor, Jesus had been crucified, a punishment reserved for the lowliest criminals. It was meant to end his story. Instead, it began a movement. His followers believed he had risen from the dead. They told the story again and again, in homes, in markets, in the catacombs beneath Rome itself. And slowly, quietly, Christianity began to grow. At first, it was just another sect among many. Rome was used to gods, and there were hundreds of them. As long as citizens sacrificed to the emperor's spirit, they could worship as they pleased. But Christians refused. They would not bow to statues. They would not say that Caesar was divine. They believed in one God and one truth. This defiance was dangerous, not because it was loud, but because it was unshakable. Rome responded with fire and fear. Nero, the emperor, blamed the Christians for a great fire that swept through the city in 64 CE. He had them torn by dogs, burned alive, crucified in gardens. It was horror. It was meant to erase them. But persecution only strengthened their resolve. From city to city, From Antioch to Corinth, Christian communities grew, underground, but unbroken. They met in secret. They sang in whispers. They carved the symbol of the fish on walls to recognize one another. And in their letters, preserved, copied, spread, they told the story of a man who forgave his killers, who promised life after death, and who welcomed all, regardless of wealth, status, or origin. By the time of the 3rd century, Christianity was no longer a whisper. It was a wave. Even members of the Roman elite began to convert, quietly at first, then openly. Rome had built roads, and Christianity walked them. Rome had unified languages, and Christianity used them. Rome had conquered with the sword, but this new faith conquered hearts. So let yourself drift now, past flickering torches in the catacombs, past scrolls written in trembling hands, past the prayers of women, slaves, soldiers, all bound together by hope. Rome had given the world law, architecture, empire. But now from its edges came something else, a message of grace. And it would change everything. The empire stood tall. Its borders stretched from misty Britannia to the gold-lit sands of Arabia. Rome was no longer growing. It was breathing, settling into the weight of its own greatness. This was the age of emperors cast in marble, some brilliant, some brutal, some both. After Augustus came dynasties, the Julio-Claudians, the Flavians, the 5 good emperors. Each left a mark, some like gentle carvings, others like cracks in stone. Hadrian, the architect-emperor. He wore a philosopher's beard and carried blueprints in his mind. He traveled more than any ruler before him, walking the empire as if to memorize it. He built cities, temples, libraries. But his most famous legacy? A wall. In the northern wilds of Britannia, where icy winds howled and tribes refused Roman order, Hadrian said, "Enough." Hadrian's wall, built around 122 C, wasn't just defense. It was a line in the earth, whispering, "Here, Rome ends." And yet, even behind walls, Rome endured. Next came Antoninus Pius, a ruler so gentle his reign left barely a scratch in history, because there were no wars to record. Then Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. By candlelight in military tents, he wrote the Meditations, a diary of doubt and discipline, filled with wisdom for future emperors and tired souls. He believed in virtue, in duty, in the stillness of a mind that knows how to suffer with grace. But Marcus made one mistake. He handed the empire to his son, Commodus. Where his father read books, Commodus craved applause. He believed he was Hercules reborn and fought in the Colosseum, dressed as a gladiator, swinging a gilded sword while Rome's elite looked on in forced admiration. He renamed the months after himself. He renamed Rome itself, Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus. The Senate hated him, the people feared him, and the empire began to tremble. He was assassinated in 192 CE, strangled by a wrestler in his own palace bath. With him died a century of stability. The empire was still rich, still vast, but the cracks had widened. Civil war followed. Rival generals marched legions against each other, and the dream of a peaceful succession shattered. Rome had seen madness before, but now it would face chaos. So let your thoughts drift through the marble libraries of Hadrian, the silent reflections of Marcus, the golden excess of Commodus. One emperor builds, another contemplates, a third destroys. And yet, the empire still stands. For now, nothing lasts forever, not even Rome. It didn't fall in a single night. There were no flaming battlements, no single villain who brought it all down. Instead, the Roman Empire faded like a day that turns slowly into dusk, the sun still warm on your skin as the shadows stretch longer. This was the long twilight of Rome. After the madness of Commodus, the empire lurched forward. Emperors came and went, some crowned by blood, others by bribery. Some lasted years, others days. In one chaotic year alone, Rome saw 26 emperors. They called it the crisis of the 3rd century. But Rome, somehow, still held together. Then came Diocletian, a reformer, a commander, and a man who saw what Rome had become, too big, too brittle to be ruled by one alone. He split the empire in two, East and West, 2 emperors, 2 courts, 2 Romes. It was supposed to be a solution, a way to stabilize, to breathe, and it worked, for a while. Then came Constantine. Constantine the Great, the emperor who saw a vision in the sky, a cross of light, and the words, "In this sign you will conquer." He fought under that symbol and won. In 313 CE, he issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity. A faith that once hid in tombs was now embraced in palaces. By the end of his life, Constantine had founded a new capital in the east, Constantinople, a shimmering city on the Bosporus, built where Europe meets Asia, bathed in gold, guarded by sea. It would outlive Rome itself. In the west, the old capital staggered. Invasions came like storms. Goths, Vandals, Huns. Names once whispered at campfires were now heard at city gates. The Roman army, once the pride of the world, now hired mercenaries to fill its ranks. And on September 4th, 476 CE, a boy emperor named Romulus Augustulus was deposed by a barbarian king. Rome had fallen, but did it truly end? The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, lived on for another 1,000 years. Roman law shaped Europe. Roman roads became modern highways. Roman language, Latin, echoes in every corner of science, medicine, and art. And the idea of Rome, its dreams of order, power, unity, would inspire kings, popes, and revolutions for centuries to come. So let your mind rest now under a sky once mapped by Roman astronomers, beside aqueducts still standing, in cities whose bones were laid by legionnaires. Rome may be gone, but its shadow remains, not in ruin, but in legacy, in law, in language, in every dream of a civilization that dares to reach beyond itself. The marble has cracked, the legions are silent, but the empire whispers still. Rome had fallen, but only in the west. To the east, the empire still breathed, not as a shadow, but as a dazzling rebirth. Byzantium, later called Constantinople, rose as the new Rome, a city of domes and mosaics, of golden icons and whispered prayers, nestled between two continents. Here, the Eastern Roman Empire endured. For centuries, they still called themselves Romans. They still spoke Greek and Latin, wore tunics, and issued decrees sealed with imperial purple. But this was a new age. At its heart stood the Hagia Sophia, a cathedral so vast, so awe-inspiring, that visitors swore the dome floated on light. Built under Emperor Justinian in the 6th century, it stood as a declaration that Rome might be gone in name, but not in spirit. Justinian dreamed of reconquering the West. He sent his general Belisarius to retake lost lands, Italy, North Africa, even parts of Spain. For a moment it seemed possible, Rome reborn. But dreams are costly. Wars drain the treasury, plagues thin the population, and with every victory, cracks deepened back home. Still, the Byzantines endured. They outlasted invaders, betrayals, sieges, and even a crusade that sacked their own capital in 1204. Through it all, they kept the flame alive, of Roman law, of classical knowledge, of Christian faith, now reshaped by the East. Their art shimmered with gold, their diplomacy twisted through the courts of Europe. Their walls, especially the mighty Theodosian walls, held back armies that would have swallowed any other city. And yet, in the end, even Byzantium could not escape time. In 1453, after more than 1,000 years, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. The last emperor, Constantine XI, fought on the walls as the city collapsed around him. With his death, the Roman Empire, in all its forms, was finally gone. But was it? Roman ideas flowed into the Renaissance. Byzantine scholars, fleeing west, carried ancient texts in their arms, manuscripts long forgotten, now reborn in Italy, in Florence, in Venice. Roman architecture inspired cathedrals, Roman law shaped modern justice, and the dream of empire, of unity, order, civilization, echoed in every crown, every constitution, every capital. Rome never vanished. It transformed. So let your breath slow. As you drift past candlelit chambers of Constantinople, hear the chants in Greek echo through marble halls. Feel the weight of 1,000 years beneath your feet. Empires fall, but ideas endure. And Rome, in all its beauty, its flaws, its ambition, still lingers in the bones of the world. Rome was gone. But in the quiet studios of Florence, beneath the flicker of oil lamps and the scratch of ink on parchment, Rome stirred again. The Renaissance, a word that means rebirth, was not just a rediscovery of art, but a resurrection of memory. Artists, scholars, poets, and princes looked back across the centuries and saw in Rome not ruins, but inspiration. They gathered crumbling statues, translated dusty scrolls, measured the ruins with awe, as if trying to listen to the whispers of stone, and what they heard ignited the world. Petrarch, the poet, called it the Dark Ages because he believed Rome's light had gone out. So he lit a candle with words. Brunelleschi studied the Pantheon and built the Dome of Florence, a marvel not seen since antiquity. Michelangelo sculpted David with Roman muscle and painted the Sistine Chapel like a frescoed echo of ancient grandeur. Leonardo da Vinci sketched Roman war machines and dissected the human body with the same precision that Roman physicians once practiced. Even the popes of the Vatican, men who claim the spiritual legacy of Peter, saw themselves as heirs to Caesar. They commissioned works not just of faith, but of power. St. Peter's Basilica, with its towering dome and marble colonnade, stood like a new temple in the heart of Rome, built atop the ruins of empire to declare, Rome has returned, not as an empire of swords, but of ideas. And Rome's influence stretched beyond marble. Its language, Latin, became the tongue of science, law, and diplomacy. Its laws shaped the foundations of European courts. Its philosophy guided kings and republics alike. The Renaissance did not rebuild Rome, but it reimagined it as a symbol of excellence, of beauty, of human potential. To be Roman once meant citizenship. Now it meant genius. So as you close your eyes, drift gently past candlelit studies filled with scrolls, walk beside artists who saw in every ruin the promise of something eternal. Rome had fallen, but in the hands of the Renaissance, it rose again, not in conquest, but in creation. It's easy to think of Rome as ancient history. Marble columns, broken statues, dusty museums, and silent ruins. But Rome never truly left. Its fingerprints are everywhere, etched into law, language, architecture, and identity, invisible, yet unmistakable. In many ways, we are all living in Rome's long shadow. Look around you. Every time a court convenes, when a citizen is innocent until proven guilty, you hear the echo of Roman law, the 12 tables, the voices of Cicero, the reasoned justice of Justinian's codex. When a building arches upward in graceful curves, or domes rise over capitals and cathedrals, you see Rome's eye for symmetry and strength. Every republic, every constitution, every debate held in a democratic chamber traces its ancestry to the Roman Senate, to assemblies under open sky, to a people who once threw out kings and said, "Let the people rule." And what about language? Latin, the mother of so many tongues, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, even English, though Germanic in root, is peppered with Latin words: justice, liberty, constitution, empire, all Roman. Even the very name civilization stems from civitas, the Roman word for citizenship. And then there is the calendar you live by, the Julian calendar, born under Caesar's reforms, July named after him, August after Augustus. Rome watches your time, your months, your years. The founding fathers of the United States looked to Rome for inspiration. Their architecture mimicked Roman temples. Their Senate was named after Rome's. The very concept of a republic, of power in the hands of the people, was reborn from Roman soil. Napoleon crowned himself in imitation of Caesar. Mussolini spoke of reviving a new Roman Empire. Even space missions, Apollo, bear the names of Roman deities. But Rome's legacy isn't just in monuments or institutions. It's in ideals: order, justice, endurance. Rome teaches that civilizations rise not just with armies, but with vision, with law, language, and dreams that outlive stone. So close your eyes now, as the world turns under the same stars that once guided Roman ships. Let yourself drift across time, through streets paved by legionnaires, past aqueducts still carrying water, into the quiet hum of a world that still whispers in Latin. Rome is not gone. It lives in every courthouse, every Capitol dome, every language, every law, every dream of a civilization that dares to last. It lives in you. So now we rest. We've walked among kings and commoners, through golden domes and crumbling columns, from muddy huts on the Tiber's shore to marble halls that touch the sky. We've seen Rome rise, from myth to might, from sword to scroll, from empire to echo. And though her emperors sleep and her legions march no more, her voice still murmurs through the quiet, a whisper in every city, a breath in every law, a glimmer in every dream of a world built on reason, rhythm, and reach. Lay down now. Let the weight of centuries soften. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on the Tiber, floating gently into the hush of history. Imagine torchlight flickering along ancient roads, the warm hum of a market at dusk, the rustle of togas in marble forums, the hush of sandals on worn stone. The empire sleeps now, and so can you. Let the names blur into stardust. Romulus, Caesar, Constantine, not forgotten, just resting. You are safe here, in the hush of history, in the gentle rise and fall of time. Rome has done its part. The world it dreamed still lives. And as you drift into sleep, you carry it with you, in your breath, your mind, your heart. Good night, traveler of time. Sleep softly, and let the eternal city watch over your dreams.